Are the Nashville Predators a playoff team? That idea might not be as far-fetched as you think. Today, we're going to highlight 3 reasons why the Nashville Predators can make the playoffs in 2024 today on the Locked On Predators podcast.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making the Locked On Predators podcast your first listen of the day. Every single day, we are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, want to give a special hello to our loyal Locked On Pred heads out there, the everydayers who tune into every single show. We love you guys, and we appreciate the support you give us week after week after week. I'm Nick Morgan. I'm a writer at Penalty Box Radio, and I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer at InsideThePreds.com.
And we pride ourselves on being hocktomists, right?
Oh my gosh. We are delightful and hocktomistic, if nothing else.
Yeah. It seems like we might be the only hocktomists regarding the Nashville Predators next year. Not many people like where they're at heading into the season.
No. Odds are not ever in our favor, friends. Literally. The odds are not in their favor.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean they can't sneak their way into a playoff spot yet again, which is their trademark, apparently, over the past few years.
It will feel different this year, though. It would feel different this year if they snuck into the playoffs.
Yeah, this would feel more like the 2008 vibe, as opposed to, let's say, 3 years ago when they snuck into the playoffs despite, expecting to be a Stanley Cup contender.
Yeah.
So today on the show, we are highlighting 3 reasons why the Nashville Predators can make the playoffs in 2024. And there's obviously some obvious ones out there, like, Juuse Saros. We've talked about how he is, kind of positioned going into next year. Obviously, you need big years from your stars. Those are all obvious ones. We're not going to pick the low-hanging fruit.
No.
We're going a little bit more head honcho-ish here. And going for some dark horse reasons why. Number one, we talk about Juuse Saros and how he needs to, kind of be a game stealer again. But what about the team in front of him? Reason number one, the Nashville Predators can make the playoffs in 2024 is better defense than 2023.
Yes. Yeah. And the defense is something that you and I have kind of stressed over a little bit. So this may seem odd to be hocktomistic and to say, look, the defense could help the Predators sneak into the playoff, but hear us out, friends, hear us out, because it's a different looking defense. A lot of things went wrong for the defense last season. And this is funny, as we were talking through this episode, I was like, where the wheels came off the bus, Nick? The wheels came off the bus when we lost Mark Borowiecki. Like all the way back in October, that was the beginning of the wheels. Because when you lose Mark Borowiecki kind of anchoring the third line of that defense, the cycle began, and so it's been a while, friends, since we've seen a defense that we feel hocktomistic about. But for me, the wheels came off the bus when we lost Boro, and you lost this. We know exactly what we're going to get on that third pairing. Like, we've got a guy. We've got a guy back there. Didn't have a guy back there for, the remainder of the season.
Well, they also wound up playing, 2 months of the season with just 6 defenders on the roster. That kind of wound up being the case, and you didn't have guys rotating in and out. There wasn't any competition. Let's look at these stats, and we talked about it before. In terms of shot attempts against, Corsi against per 60, the Preds were 30th in the entire NHL. The only 2 teams they were better than were the Mighty Ducks and Columbus Blue Jackets, a.k.a. the 2 worst teams in the NHL. The team that finished just ahead of Nashville was the Chicago Blackhawks, aka the team that was the third worst in the NHL and got the number one pick.
Yeah.
They ranked 28th in expected goals against. They ranked 24th in high danger chances against and 24th in Corsi for percentage, kind of helped out by an okay defense an okay offense. Times last year. But then the kicker is only 12th in actual goals against. So that tells you that Juuse Saros was having the time of his life.
Yeah.
And goal.
Anytime you see a reassuring defensive stat from last season, just attribute that to Juuse Saros.
Yeah.
Because his saves above expected, his wins above replacement, were top of the league, really. So any sort of, and I don't mean that unkindly, because really there wasn't a defense for the Predators last season. There was no Ryan McDonagh. The Ryan McDonagh experiment with Mattias Ekholm fell apart rather quickly. Then he was injured, and then you lost Roman Josi, and then you traded Mattias Ekholm, and then you brought in, we got Cal Foote via trade, we got Tyson Barrie via trade. But at that point, it was just band-aiding the blue line. So defense last year, there's really nowhere to go but up. Nowhere to go but up, friends.
Yeah, and here's the thing, because a lot of people are going to respond to this going, well, the Predators didn't really make any big overhaul on defense besides Luke Schenn. So why are we so optimistic that defense is going to take a step forward? Remember, there was a coaching change.
Mm-hmm.
And that means a different strategy. Andrew Brunette is a lot different than John Hynes when it comes to strategy. He's more on the front foot. He's more about puck possession.
Yes.
John Hynes was more about, kind of parking the bus and waiting for counterattacks and, sort of being patient and waiting for chances to open up. We've seen it before. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you the Predators are going to have the number one defense in the NHL next year.
No.
But how often have we seen teams seemingly, go from, worst in the NHL in terms of defense, change coaches, and all of a sudden that same sort of core group jumps and becomes, maybe not always one of the best, but
good enough,
really good.
Yeah.
And one team that was like that was the New York Islanders.
Mm-hmm.
It's statistically the worst defense in the entire NHL. The year before Barry Trotz got there, Barry Trotz came in within 2 years. The Islanders were the number one defense in the entire NHL, with mostly kind of the same cast of characters.
Yeah.
So, you're going to have, people that Andrew Brunette's going to come in and use maybe Roman Josi differently than John Hynes did. Maybe he sees the pairings work out different. Maybe he looks at somebody like Jeremy Lauzon and it's like, you've been doing this under John Hynes. I want you to play more this way.
Right.
And then, you can do that. You just improve that defense just a little bit and just a little bit. And all of a sudden, Juuse Saros isn't stopping 42 out of 45 shots. He's stopping, 28 out of 29. And that's a 2-goal difference that's going to win you some games.
Yeah. And I agree with what you're saying. I think it'll be interesting to see what is Andrew Brunette going to do. One of the players that I think about that we didn't have a lot last season was Alexander Carrier, out with injury. But we've seen in previous seasons what he can do. How is Brunette going to use Carrier? Are we going to open up some offensive opportunity for him? There's lots of different ways that this defense can come together, play together. And you hit on the key. This defense only needs to get a little bit better to make a big difference because the Predators have Juuse Saros.
Yeah. And, Dante Fabro, another guy you talk about too, that might have a different role. The Preds can do that. The Preds can just take a little step forward, maybe be sort of middle of the pack in terms of defense and not last. If Juuse Saros plays as well as he did last year, that is going to make a huge difference directly to a few more wins, Anne, at least in my mind.
Yep.
More coming up in just a second, including can the Predators fix one of the biggest things that killed them last season? there's cause to believe they might take a little bit step forward. We're going to talk about that in just a second, but first, want to mention today's episode brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, you can take your first swing at betting on Major League Baseball and FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bet, up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend on betting everything from the money line to the over-under and how many runs are going to be scored to who you think is going to hit the first home run of the game to how many strikeouts your starting pitcher is going to have in that game. And it's all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, best part about FanDuel, when you win, you can get paid out instantly. There's no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. Again, FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. All right. And we are talking about 3 reasons why the Nashville Predators can make the playoffs next year. Do the honors with reason number 2.
So reason number 2 is kind of an off the wall, not necessarily statistics based reason, but I'm right. And I can tell you why. Yeah. Reason number 2 is simply the vibe and leadership of this team. Hear me out, friends. So we're coming off of a season where you had a slew of young players. You're talking Luke Evangelista. You're talking Juuso Saros. You're talking Cody Glass. Phil Tomasino, a big one, who really got into the lineup, or in Tomasino's case, back into the lineup in the NHL. These guys have had a taste of what top minutes feels like in the NHL, and those boys liked it. They had a lot of fun. One of the things that you heard consistently during that last stretch of the season, when it was a lot of young players that had been called up, one of the things that you even heard from the veterans watching who were injured in the postseason is they were having so much fun. They were having so much fun. The energy was so great. And I'm telling you, those young players are coming back and they've sat at the table and they are not going to want to go back to the kiddie table at Thanksgiving, my friends. So you have players who are coming into training camp and they are hungry to get what they want. They've had a taste of it, friends, and they aren't going back to the all natural, flavor-free desserts. They want the good stuff. So I think you're coming in with these younger players who are having hunger. Here's the other piece that I think is so important is the voices in the locker room are different. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to extrapolate too much negatively because, again, this is our hocktomism episode. So I'm not saying anything negative necessarily about the vibe in the locker room last season. But for me, here's a key piece in what's going to change for the Nashville Predators, and that is bringing in Ryan O'Reilly. On the ice, yeah, great two-way player. Yes, he's a serial winner, as Barrie Trotz likes to call him. But here's where Ryan O'Reilly is going to make the biggest difference. It's in the locker room, my friends. Mm-hmm. That's where Ryan O'Reilly is going to transform this Nashville Predators team.
Yeah. And sometimes we've talked about this, and sometimes you just need a different voice.
Yes.
Sort of a different set of voices, a different message, and not just because they're going to get that from the coaching staff. They're going to get that from management, but you need a different set of voices actually in the locker room too. Mm-hmm. And, Josi's going to be there. Filip Forsberg is going to be there. Right. That those voices aren't going to change, but now you have, some maybe different players in prime positions, sort of carrying the message in the team, and more importantly, leading by example too.
Yes.
And I think that's sort of the biggest thing.
With Ryan O'Reilly, I think that's one of the things that Barrie Trotz really hit home when he talked about him is he's like, this guy's going to lead by example. He's going to be the first one on the ice. He's going to be the last one off the ice. But here's something that happened with Ryan O'Reilly that maybe is going to ruffle some feathers. And I'm not even saying that this was handled necessarily the way that gentlemen handle things in the NHL. NHL players do things their own way. But I look back at the comments that Ryan O'Reilly made the last season he was in Buffalo at the end of this season. And it was a tough locker room exit interview for Ryan O'Reilly. He was clearly upset about how the season had gone. He was frustrated with himself and his performance. And he said the quiet part out loud. He said, it's almost like we're okay with losing. And I think, and again, you go back to like, hey, whoa, we don't handle things like that. We keep it internal. We don't, But you know what? Sometimes you got to say the quiet part out loud. And I'm like, put the guy in the locker room with the young kids, the young players, the young men. I know they're men. The young men who need to hear the life lessons, who need to hear the hard stuff every once in a while. And Barrie Trotz is looking at this team, not next season necessarily. He's looking 4 years down the road. You want that voice saying the quiet part out loud in the locker room, maybe to the media, I don't know. But you need somebody speaking some truth, because that's going to change the culture you have 4 seasons from now. That's why Ryan O'Reilly is going to make a huge difference for this Nashville Predators team.
My thing is also, you go back, and you brought this up earlier, you go back to last season when some of the young players were stepping up, and, some of the veterans were talking about, kind of them being rejuvenated and how much fun they were having. You flip that and you ask some of the young players, and they talk about guys like Ryan McDonagh. They talk about Tyson Barrie, aka the guy with mom energy. And sort of these veterans who they were a big part of the Predators, having that big run at the end of last season too, because not only did they step up their play on the ice, but they were helping, bail some of these younger players out of mistakes they made. They had their back. They didn't chastise them. You sort of led them in the locker room. They were sort of their voices, the guys that they could come to, which was important because Roman Josi wasn't there at the end of last year. Filip Forsberg wasn't there at the end of last year. Mattias Ekholm, Matt Duchene, Ryan Johansson, Mikael Granlund, all these veteran players that got, injured or traded. And that's going to be another big thing this year is they have to keep that same energy with the veterans too. Like, this can't be, once everybody gets back, this can't be a thing of, we got to meet expectations. We can't be, letting these kids off without a free press. You got to mentor them.
Right.
I think the Predators are, they have the right people in the locker room for that. And you talk about, Ryan O'Reilly, Luke Schenn is that guy too. Like Luke Schenn is 33, has had a wild NHL career. Same with Gustav Nyquist, another veteran who's been, a lot of different places, has had, a lot of different experiences. These are all people who you can see the reason why Barrie Trotz brought them in, because they have so much, I think, to offer these young players, not just in terms of, locker room leadership or anything like that, but I think the style they play on the ice complements some of these younger players too. And I think that is going to be a big thing, is you're going to see, I think, a lot of lines. And when the lineups finally come out, you're going to see a lot of lines where it's, maybe 2 young players and then a veteran.
Yes.
And I think that is sort of going to kind of be the vibe throughout this year.
It's going to be fun, y'all. Be hocktomistic about that.
And one reason why we weren't optimistic at the end of last season, we just sort of hinted on it. Everybody was hurt.
Oh, they were dropping like flies, y'all.
Everybody was hurt.
Yeah.
So reason number 3, the Nashville Predators can make the playoffs next season is health.
Come on.
Roman Josi is coming back healthy. Filip Forsberg is coming back healthy. You're going to have a revamped Ryan O'Reilly in the lineup. Alexander Carrier is not only healthy, but entering a contract year. He's going to be motivated. There's just, the health derailed the Predators so much last year. And I know, sort of the injury situation was the precipice for pulling the trigger at the trade deadline like they did. But I'm just saying, like, just imagine if you had Roman Josi for the last like 3 weeks of the season.
Gosh.
Do the Nashville Predators get into the playoffs?
Yeah.
Like just one more player would have helped that. So now you look at this year. If everybody can stay healthy, if they can do some of the other stuff, if the young players get up to speed, if Juuse Saros is still the Juuse Saros we saw last year, if everybody else is back and playing just kind of at the same level they were last year, there might be enough in there for the Predators to sneak in.
Yeah, that's one of the things that both Roman Josi and Filip Forsberg talked about in the locker room cleanout session. They were like, we wanted to get back because we just needed a couple of games.
Yeah.
We were seeing these young players doing everything and we just wanted to get back. And I think that's part of the freakiness of last season. Hockey, there are always going to be injuries, but you look at the injuries the Predators sustained last season. You had Josi and Forsberg both with concussions. And look, a concussion is an awful injury in a lot of ways. Obviously, they're cumulative. It's something that you worry about, as far as longevity of career, but they're also not linear. Your recovery from a concussion is, you may feel great one day and try to do a little more, and then you have now had a setback. And I think that kind of that up and down cycle really kept Josi and Forsberg from being back in the lineup. So those are tricky injuries to sort of coach around and have expectations of when are they going to come back. You also had kind of the freak injuries of Alexander Carrier taking a puck to the collarbone. Like, couldn't have made that shot if you had to on purpose, but that's just kind of what happened. You had McDonagh taking one to the face, so there's some freak injuries that you're like, if only the hockey gods would just glance Nashville's way, some of these might not happen. And if you have, like you say, even a couple of injuries, but you have one or two of these guys still going strong, it's a different outcome last season. And I think it also helps this team in 2024 make the playoffs. We're not necessarily sitting here saying, the odds makers in Vegas are wrong. The Predators are going to be, a Western Conference Finals team. But this is a team where if just a couple of these things go right, and they can, this is a team that could sneak into the playoffs, y'all.
It's interesting because the Predators, I think that's sort of their high window. We kind of know what their low window are. If people start getting hurt, if we see some big, decline from some of the players who we're worried about having big declines from, this can get very messy very fast. But it starts with injuries, and the Predators have to stay healthy to have a chance to even get to that high end place. And it's one of those things where last year, they lost everybody. And
y'all.
Yeah, they've lost everybody. I think at one point it was like their 7, maybe 8 leading scorers from the previous season weren't on the roster by the end of the year, either because injuries or because they got traded out. And, we were expecting last year to just be a free-for-all, and those young players, boy, they stepped up and carried the load. Juuse Saros stepped up and carried the load.
Yeah.
I don't know if the Predators can survive that same thing this year.
Right.
Because, this time, you get the injury bug again. You're not talking about, a lot of these guys who wound up being shipped out at the end of the season anyway, or didn't fit into Barry Trotz's or Andrew Burnett's long-term plans. You're talking about guys who, everybody that I think is going to make the Predators team this year or are kind of the guys the Preds want to build around, that are going to be the crux of the Preds moving forward. You can't survive, I think, a Phil Tomasino injury this year, or combined with a Roman Josi injury, or even like middle of the lineup, like Tyson Barrie, or Ryan O'Reilly gets hurt, or Cody Glass gets hurt, or Juuso Parssinen gets hurt again. Remember, he was one that missed a lot of time from the stretch due to a concussion as well. It's different last year, because last year you had sort of this young group step up and kind of prove that they could be core. Now those young players are the core. And I don't know if the Predators can survive that again. Naturally, they have people waiting in the wings in Milwaukee. Like, we know that. Like,
Right.
Mel, we assume is going to start there. Zachary Leroux, we think, is going to start there. So, you have some younger players, kind of waiting in the wings, but it feels different.
It does.
It feels different. Like, these guys that are there now felt like these are the ones that are ready. Like, they are ready for the NHL. They just proved that they can kind of carry a team towards the playoffs. I think this year would be different if the same sort of injury situation happened.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think the pool that you would draw from, like you said, in Milwaukee, there's some great talent in Milwaukee, but they still need time to simmer. Last season, these guys were ready. Luke Evangelista was biding his time. And I don't think we're going to be in that same situation this year. So I agree. Let's keep these young guys, and let's keep these veterans. Let's try to keep everybody healthy, because a healthy Nashville Predators team is going to be a lot of fun to watch, y'all. A lot of fun to watch.
Yeah. And we just spent a lot of time telling you why the Nashville Predators are going to be a playoff team. Now let's talk about why they're not. Coming up later this week on the Locked On Predators podcast, we're going to go 3 reasons why the Nashville Predators will miss the playoffs in 2024, why they won't be a playoff team. So stay tuned for that, and we will have that out for you later this week. And where can the people find your work?
You can find my work online at InsideThePreds.com. You can find me on Twitter at AnnK_Mama on Ice.
You can read my work at penaltyboxradio.com. Got a new article up there today about Ryan O'Reilly's defense, what makes him one of the best two-way players in the game. Broke down some videos showcasing some specific plays. So tune into that today. You can also find me on Twitter at _NSMorgan. That's going to do it for us on today's Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. We will be back tomorrow or Wednesday, probably Wednesday. I don't know. We're on 3 shows a week now. We'll be back later this week with an all-new episode. We'll see you then.